Hi there, welcome to this build of a 40-inch wingspan Keil Kraft Gypsy. Now this is a lovely Wakefield design that was done by Bill Dean in 1949. Now you can get the plans from AutoZone. If you have a look in the description below, there'll be a link where you can download them for free. I started building this from a Ripmax kit which I've had a few issues with, so hence I had to download my own plans, and the plans on AutoZone, the original Keil Kraft plans, are really good. So we're cracking on with this now and we're almost finished. You know, I can see the finishing line and I'm really keen to get this done. In the last video we got the fuselage covered in 38 micron laminating film, and I'm really keen to get on now and start covering this in tissue. But there's one thing that we've got to do first, and that is to fit an acetate windscreen around the where the windows are. So we're going to be doing that in this video today, and we're going to make up some templates. I was just looking over for some card. I've got some card here, and I'm going to be making up a windscreen first in card that comes all the way around and down these side windows and the other side. We're going to do it all in one go. And the beauty of making it up in card is that we can cut it to shape, see it's not quite right, and we can stick a bit on, and then we can try it again, stick a bit on, until eventually, and marking it and cutting bits off, until we get a windscreen that fits, or a template of a windscreen. And then we can transfer that to acetate. It would be a big waste if we got the acetate and we started. It's got some acetate here, something nice and thin. This is about 140 or 100 microns, so it's nice and thin. It'd be such a waste if we just kept trying to cut out and modify and cut out. It'd be such a waste of acetate, so much better to do it in card. So I will do the first incarnation of a template, and we'll have a look at that, and then we'll talk about how we're going to modify it. Okay, well first off I'm just going to make something very simple. Strip of paper, a couple of holes cut out, or slots cut out, for the carbon fibre rod. Would have been easier without the rod, but then we would have problems getting it in to glue it properly, so I've decided to go this route. Now we can just hook that around like that, and we can see that if I just get this so it fits there. Now there we have a rough approximation of a windscreen. Now what we need to do, that's not brilliant, but what we need to do is we need to add some paper on the sides. So we're going to just draw along there. We need to cut this off and stick it on going along the sides there, and exactly the same on this side. We can see we just need to cut that off there and stick it on. Now we're going to do that now, but we will of course need to make some modifications once we've done that. It's just a process of trial and error really, to try and get this to fit properly. So now we're just going to stick that on there like that, and this piece we can stick on here. So we're going to keep doing this essentially. How does that go? I need a bigger piece of paper. I'll do that in just a second, but I'll just show you how I'm going to do this. So now we've got a bigger piece of paper that is going to fit slightly better. You imagine trying to do this first off with a piece of acetate. Right, now we can see that that roughly fits. If I just grip that, it's quite. So let me just. There we go. That roughly fits along there now, like that. But what we need to do is we need to add some more at the top, a little bit at the back, and obviously this side I need to add a lot more. So this is how essentially I make up my windscreens. So I'm going to get on now and play about with this until I've made up a template that actually fits that. And I think I'm going to transfer this to the card. This is paper, but it's a little bit too thin. And when I try and wrap it round on the front here, it's buckling, which isn't helpful. So I'm going to make up the top copy of this if I can, and we'll have a look at that, or near a top copy. Right, well, I've now made, getting close to a top copy of what we're going to use. It still needs trimming a little bit, but we'll have a look and see how it fits. Now you can see I've put the front legs of the plane, or the landing gear legs, on a towel and wrapped them up, just because it was sliding around and driving me a little bit nuts, to be honest. So now we can just hook that under the carbon fibre rod, and we can just bring that around. This is this is such a fiddly job, and but anyway, we'll get there. Now that just needs hooking up there. It's just, there we go. And I've got a couple of clips which I can use to just hold that in place roughly for the start. Now, there we go. Now that comes around quite nicely there. And one of the advantages of this is we don't have to ensure it's fuel proof. But you can see that comes all the way down the side, covers the windscreen, it bows a little bit here. But what I'm thinking is we can glue this in place. Let me just put a clip on there. Oh, missed the card. There. What I'm thinking is we can glue this in place, and then we can actually, if this is still bowing, well, I can put some creases in here that takes out a lot of the bow, but if it is still bowing, we can just then glue that down under that lip like that. We'll bring the tissue up and over, just over the edge of the acetate, so that it looks a nice seam. But you can see now that is looking pretty good. And what I need to do is I need to mark this up now where I'm going to cut and finish this, and I'll overlap it slightly past the upright there. So I need to trim that down there, and the same I'll do on this side. So just mark that. There we go. And now that is almost ready to go. It's going to need perhaps just a little bit adding there. There's a bit of a step, just a little piece in to make sure that glues properly. But that is looking really good now. I'm quite pleased with that so far. So we'll get this trimmed, get it back on, and if we're happy with it, we'll make one up in acetate. Okay, so we've got this trimmed up again. I've stuck a little bit more on here just to raise the height and a little bit to fill in a gap. So now I think we are almost ready to start cutting this out before we glue on the final acetate version. Now if I just clip that there temporarily, and we just pull that tight, clip that down the side there, and now I think that is looking pretty good. I'm quite pleased with how that's looking. If we just turn that around. Now we have to think at this stage of, she does that one a little bit. I think actually that is, oops, that is angling down a little bit there. So I'm just going to take a slither off that, and if we look through this side, I don't know whether it shows, but you can see that there's a little bit of a excess there, just if you look through to the other side. So I'm going to trim that off, and then we need to think about how we're going to attach this. Now we could use these clips along the top, that's fine, but what I like to do is to clamp it, and I like to put on clamps like this, just very gently, and maybe some clamps along here. Now I don't know whether I've got clamps big enough that will go all the way down to there. Yes, I have. That will go down. Now, what we need to think about is how much pressure we're going to put on these points. And if I do that, I can see the fuselage flexing in and out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off this windscreen. I'm going to think about where I'm going to clamp it, and I'm going to get some bits of balsa like this, and just like, for example, I want to put a clamp in here, across here. So I'm going to cut a piece of balsa and just wedge it in there. Will that fit? No, that won't quite fit, but just wedge it in, and that will allow me to clamp onto that without worrying about it pushing in and breaking. And the same here. Here it's okay, we've got a cross member where we're going to put the which is holding the servo tray, and we're going to put a clamp there, but here that just flexes in really badly, so I'm going to cut a piece of balsa for that as well. So I'll get those bits of balsa cut, and we'll get this cut out in acetate. Okay, before I start cutting out the acetate, you can see I've got a piece of balsa there, just so I can put a clamp there. I mean, I'm not going to clamp it really tight, but it would be a shame to do any damage. And you can see there's a couple of pieces of balsa in the back here, so I can clamp across there. I tell you what, this landing gear is the bane of my life. It's so long and sticking out, and it just keeps catching on everything. Oh dear. Anyway, I will get this, put that on one side, and I will get this acetate cut up. Right, now I'm marking up the acetate. The acetate I've got isn't very good. It's got a few dents and things in it, but I'm trying to avoid those. So I've put my template onto the acetate, and I've weighed it down. And what I'm doing is I'm just going around with a marker pen like this to show where I need to cut it out. And I will then take some scissors to it and cut it out. Now the good thing about doing this is that the marker pen will just come off with a little bit of alcohol once I've cut it out. So now we should have our template. I've got a pair of scissors, and I think I've avoided most of the dents. So now I'm just going to go along and cut this out. It is really nice and thin, this acetate. I don't know whether I said, but it's 100 microns, so a lot thinner than I've used on some of my bigger projects. But now I'm being very slightly generous on the bottom here. Okay, so I've cut that out now, and it's a lot easier to cut out with a pair of scissors than a scalpel. And we're just going to use a little bit of this 70% ethanol, just to take off the pen, which will come off really easily. Oops, going on my bench. There we go, look. So once I've done this, I will test fit this. It will probably need a little bit of trimming around where the dowels are going to go, but we'll have a look once that's been done, and then we'll get this thing glued on. Right, well, I've now got this windscreen in place, and I'm really pleased with how it's fitting. It's a little bit hanging over the top here, but it's really thin. I can trim that with a scalpel once we're done. I haven't glued it, but I've just got the clamps on so that it's kind of a dry run really, so I know how I'm going to clamp it and where I'm going to clamp it. I'll put more clamps on than I had. So, but that fits really nice, and I haven't put the creases down the windscreen. I didn't think they were necessary. You can see there's a little bit of overlap coming down onto the laminating film. That should show up on that side particularly. I don't know, but I've done that deliberately because we're going to cover up to the bottom, the window, the bottom of the window, so the top of the balsa along here anyway. So you will see a little bit of a line where that acetate finishes, but the more overlap, the better the grip we've got. And I'm going to be gluing it with this Formula 560. I think this is Pacer, but I've had this quite a long time, and I think Zap do it now. It's a Zap product. So the next thing to do is to get this glued, and I'm just going to take a brush, just looking for a brush here, and I will just be pasting on the balsa where it's going to glue and along the top here, and then I'll clamp it in place, and I will leave it overnight. I won't touch it again today, and well, it's just coming up to midday, so it'll have a good, well, I'll probably leave it 24 hours to dry. It dries a lot quicker if it's acetate to balsa, but some of this is acetate to laminating film, so it will take longer to dry out. So I'm going to get this glued up now, and then we'll have a look at it once I've got it covered in clamps and all glued. Now I'm ready to glue this, but there's one thing that's worth saying before I do glue it, and that is we need to take an impression of the shape of the windows. So we're going to put a piece of card out, and we're just going to draw around the inside here so that we know the shape of both the left and the right windows. The reason we're doing that is because when we come to cover this in tissue, we're going to cut out the shape of the windows so that they're a nice clean shape around here. Once we've got the acetate on, we can't do that, and it will be more difficult. So this is just saving us a bit of effort by doing it now. So I'm just going to put that down on the bench maybe, or maybe hold it and draw around that. Okay, so there we go. Left and right window patterns for when we put the tissue. So now I'm going to get this glued and get this clamped on. It'd be good to get it done. Okay, you can see I've got these all clamped up now, and I put a couple of pieces of wood under those clamps just to hold it along that bottom edge. Hopefully that is okay. I'll be perfectly honest with you, this isn't one of my favourite jobs, and it is one of the jobs in building that I find quite quite stressful. So I would much rather be doing covering or a whole host of different jobs, sanding or anything, than sticking on windscreens and windows. But anyway, we'll see how that is tomorrow, but it looks okay for the moment, so we'll take the clamps off tomorrow. Right, well, I'm going to take the clamps off. It's after midday now, so this has been on at least 24 hours, and I've taken the clips off because I wanted to see if it looked like it had stuck, which it did. So we'll just take off these clamps now very carefully. I do know that where the acetate is on the laminating film in a couple of areas, it's still looking quite white, like it hasn't gone off, because it doesn't dry out as well. I tell you what, let me take these off first. But there was quite a lot of it that was stuck onto the wood, like in these areas, so I know there's going to be enough to actually hold the acetate in place, or at least I hope so. So anyway, let's get these off, and now hopefully these pieces of wood haven't stuck to the acetate. There we go. And that one, last one now. There we go. Excellent, that's good. Slide that out of the way. Now that is looking good. Now, as I said, you can still see the white here where this hasn't gone off, and that will go off. You can see it's starting to go off along here. There's a couple of little drips just there which I'll pick off, but I won't do that until everything's dry. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work on something else. I've got another project I'm working on, and I'm just going to leave this on one side, not touch it. I'm not even going to trim the top, which needs trimming. Just going to leave it, and that will dry out in a day or so. I mean, I could have pricked it with a pin on the balsa just to allow it to dry out a little bit quicker, but I didn't really want to. Like I say, it will dry out, and it has started in places along here and along the top. so it's just where it's a little bit thicker, but I think that is looking quite nice. And I'll just show you the front. You can see on the front there how that is nice and tight around here. So, and as I said, I'm just going to lap the tissue up over that when we come to do the tissue in the next video. It's, and one of the benefits, and I think I mentioned this before, is that we don't have to worry about it being fuel proof. If this was a diesel or a glow motor powering this, then I'd be wanting to seal around the top and the sides, or at least around the top anyway, and around this front edge a lot better perhaps. But anyway, I'm going to draw this video to a close now, and I'm really pleased to get this done because I think I said earlier, it's not one of my favourite jobs. I mean, it goes okay, it looks nice, but I do find it a little bit stressful at times. But anyway, going to draw this to a close, and in the next video we're going to get this fuselage covered in some tissue. So anyway, thanks very much, hope you've enjoyed it.